Right now, we have a $150 million organic pipeline of transportation revenue ready to go. We were not able to onboard it during the last administration. I won't go into detail on that.
I mean, you don't need to. It's obvious. The SEC and the government has actually actively been preventing like real world use cases and incentivizing literal like meme coin degeneracy gambling. Like,
right.
That's
And
what
then,
they've been
and then asking
the only-
everybody,
Yeah.
where are the real world use cases? Right? Yeah.
So
exactly.
allow the real world use
Right,
cases. Quit suing every fucking legitimate company
Yes.
that tries to actually provide some real value to the world.
Yeah.
Stay the fuck out of the way.
Yeah.
Let shit actually get built.
Right.
And like, let's show some real world use cases like that where you can share some of that revenue and reward for people that are supporting actual free market capitalist value propositions that are making the world a better place.
I will say this. I've been on the Hill a lot. I've talked to a lot of people. I do think that we're going to get a lot more regulatory clarity this year. And I think when we have that, you're going to see companies like TCS be able to be a lot more creative in terms of incentivizing all of the counterparties.
Welcome back to another episode of Cypherpunk'd, where we explore money's history, crypto's future, and Web3's role in advancing human rights, freedom, and digital liberty. Today, we've got a heavy hitter in the house, Todd Ziegler. This guy is a founder, developer, investor, lawyer, and a closer of Fortune 500 deals, with a resume spanning fintech, freight tech, blockchain, and Web3. Todd's shaking things up with Truck CoinSwap, revolutionizing transportation finance through tokenization, and now he's teamed up with Node 40 to make tax reporting and compliance a breeze. And the IRS. Todd, man, it's awesome to have you here. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, I appreciate the invite.
So let's start with the why. You said Truck CoinSwap isn't just about faster payments. It's about fixing a broken system that's screwing over truckers and small businesses.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And a lot of people don't understand that we have the equivalent of a silent value-added tax in the system right now, because really the problem that TCS solves is a payments problem, right? And I know digital payments is, as a concept in a number of industries, is getting very popular right now. But in the trucking industry in particular, you've got smaller businesses typically, and these can be freight brokerages, these can be transportation companies, trucking companies. They're dealing with 30 to 180 day pay terms. They can't wait 30 days to get paid. They certainly can't wait 6 months to get paid. So most of these companies, about 70% of them in a $2 trillion market in the United States, have to sell their invoices to what are commonly known as factoring companies. They're banks and intermediaries primarily. And, you know, industry standard, they're typically paying somewhere in the ballpark of 3%. 3% doesn't sound that bad, but it's 3% of gross. So if you owned a truck and you're driving a load of potatoes from Wyoming to New York and the freight rate's $10,000, your net margin on that load might be 10% if you're lucky. It's probably more like 5 these days. But if you have a 10% net revenue and you're paying 3% of gross, that's $300. That's 30% of your net revenue, right? If your net revenue is 5% on the deal, it's 60% of your net revenue. And I don't know many businesses in many industries that can sustain that for very long.
Yeah. So let me break this down for our listeners so they can understand. So I can understand and they can understand. The issue is that if you're a truck driver, you know, I've got a load, I'm going to pick up a load of, you know, let's just say potatoes, right? I'm transporting the potatoes from Iowa to, you know, New York, right?
Right.
And, you know, the whole value of that truckload might be, let's use the $10,000, right? That's the gross.
Right.
And my profit margin on that might be $1,000, right? I'm taking you know, it's a
10, probably 5 to 10%.
So, you know, $9,000 of that is cost. And then, you know, I'm getting that extra $1,000. That's my profit margin. Now, when I drop those potatoes off, what you're saying is instead of just being paid,
right,
that's not happening.
Yeah, you're getting an IOU.
I'm getting an IOU as a small business owner, a truck driver that had to pay the gas and, you know, deal with my truck and all these different things. I now have an IOU.
Right. A receivable,
right?
Yeah.
And my profit on that is $1,000, right? So once I get the $10,000, I can give $9,000 to whatever, and then I keep my profit, right? That's kind of the concept of how that works.
Right. And the interesting thing too is it costs about $1,500 in diesel to fill up a truck. So you're taking on all the front end costs, right? The insurance costs, the truck driving costs, right? There's probably tolls, there's probably lumpers, there's all of these fees that you're paying.
Lot lizards.
Lot lizards. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you gotta put those in your operating costs. Yeah, for sure. But yeah, so and then you do your job. You do your job perfectly. You deliver those potatoes on time and in good order, and you're going to get a receivable that says that we'll pay you in 30 to 180 days.
Okay.
That doesn't work.
Mhm.
It doesn't work at all.
Yeah, most people that are running a small business are operating on small margins, and that like they need to live, right?
Yeah.
Like that money is important.
Right.
Um,
Right.
so explain this concept of how this is dealt with now. You use the term factorization. Can you like explain that? Like,
Yeah, factoring companies are typically banks and intermediaries, and basically what they're doing is they're issuing hard money loans. They're issuing payday loans. 3%. It's like for a lot of people, 3% doesn't sound that bad, but that's typically 36% annualized interest.
Mhm.
Right? Not many.
payday loan. It's hard money.
Yeah. Not many people would buy a house or take on a credit card at a 36% annualized
Yeah.
interest rate.
I mean,
Right?
your credit card's like 25 to 29%. So
Right,
it's even
right.
worse than that.
Right. So think about this. You're a one truck owner operator. You've done your job. You've done all the hard work. You've paid all the upfront costs. You now have a receivable, right? A freight invoice from a company that's probably pretty solvent, right? Or you wouldn't have taken the load. And now you're paying a 36% rate of interest to get paid in 10 days by a bank or a factoring company because you can't wait 30 to 180 days to get paid directly by the shipper. And that's a big problem for the owner. That's a big problem for the small business, but it's also a macroeconomic problem writ large because when we're asking these, and just so people know, about 70% of all goods in the United States and Canada are on a truck at some point, right? I mean, it's a big continent, right? Most things move by truck. And when you're forcing these transportation companies, it could be a brokerage, it could be a third-party logistics company, it could be a trucking company. When you're forcing them to take on these enormous costs of capital, ultimately that's a tax, and it's going to move down to consumers and households. So when people go to the grocery store, and we've heard a lot in the media recently about the price of milk and eggs, right? It's not just inflation. It's also these silent VAT-like taxes that result from intermediaries and banks charging these high costs of capital that really don't make sense. But there simply was no alternative to the current system until TCS blockchain came along.
So a lot of people always ask, what's the real world use case of blockchain? What are some real world use cases? Would you say this is a real world use case?
Yeah, I would say I would say next to stable coins, it's the best real world use case that I've encountered.
Okay. So explain what TruckCoinSwap is. Explain how it works. It's a token. Why is there a blockchain involved?
Sure.
How does it come in? Let's try to break it down so it's like anybody can, like Eli 5 this. Explain it like 5.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have trucking companies on our platform now. We're an active business.
Mhm.
Our hard launch is at the Mid-America Truck Show next month. But really, at the end of the day, we're a trade finance and a blockchain as a service company. And effectively, the solution that we provide to the transportation industry is we can get these carriers, these trucking companies and transportation companies paid in 1 to 2 business days, typically 90% cheaper than what a factoring company or an intermediary would charge them. Now, we use blockchain rails to do that. This goes directly to the Satoshi thesis, right? And I'm definitely a pro Bitcoin guy. I own Bitcoin. I think most people would agree at this point that Bitcoin is the premier store of wealth.
Yeah.
Perhaps not just in crypto, perhaps with respect to all money.
I think so personally.
Right, around the world. But the Satoshi thesis itself was about creating blockchain rails to basically disintermediate and disrupt banking rails, right? Faster, cheaper payments, faster reconciliation, business to business, peer to peer. I think that's one of the reasons why we're seeing digital payments become so popular right now, because I don't think this genie goes back into the bottle.
I agree.
I think when businesses understand that they can get faster and cheaper payments on blockchain rails through digital assets, it's like, why would we go back to doing things the way that we're doing them on banking rails, right?
Yeah. Satoshi actually did, a lot of people don't know this, but he actually talked about this in some of his posts. He actually said, hey, there will, other people will take this and build on this and use different use cases. And
exactly,
he kind of was like, well before there were altcoins, he kind of insinuated the maximalists aren't going to like this, but he actually did in fact say people will find other uses for this. They'll essentially build on the open source nature and do different things. So
that's exactly right. That's exactly right.
I think Bitcoin has become something even Satoshi didn't really imagine or even think, right? It kind of has grown on its own, and it's become this beautiful base layer of money. Where very early on, if you read a lot of his posts, he was thinking more like micropayments and all this kind of stuff.
Sure.
And Bitcoin isn't really that. It's
Right.
all this other stuff now, right? And not saying you can't do micropayments on secondary and tertiary layers of Bitcoin, which you can, but Bitcoin on its base blockchain layer has become this hardest money to ever exist store of value asset that
Right.
is going to be constantly appreciating versus other softer monies that continually get debased by governments.
Right. And Lightning and companies like Lightning are doing an incredible job building on the money, as they say, but that's why we saw the advent of a lot of the L2s, right? TCS token is a Polygon token, right? We're an ERC20 Polygon token.
So you're built on Ethereum, and then Polygon's a layer 2, and then you guys are doing something. So explain why token? Why does that make sense? What does the token do?
Yeah, absolutely. And the very short answer is the TCS token facilitates that faster and cheaper settlement value to transportation companies, right? But I get the question a lot like, well, why don't you just settle in Bitcoin, or why don't you just settle in USDC? That's kind of like asking a factoring company, why don't you just settle in fiat? We could do that, right? But then we would have to go buy USDC, we'd have to go buy Bitcoin or Ethereum, we'd have to settle, and then we would have to charge our users more. We would have to charge transportation companies more because at the end of the day, TCS still has to make a profit somewhere, right? So the reason that we used an ERC20 Polygon token is because when we minted that token out at the University of Wyoming Advanced Blockchain Lab, we minted it at a zero cost basis. So we've had to make a market for the token. We've had to build value around the use case, around the company, around the tokenomics. But when we settle a company on chain in TCS token, and basically what we do is we directly deposit tokens into their wallet, into their business wallet. Okay, and we've been doing this over at Uniswap and OTC transactions, but we'll deposit the current value of that freight invoice in the US dollar value in TCS token, less a very small settlement fee. It's typically less than 1%. Okay, and then with the understanding that the transportation user is probably not wanting to sit in TCS token, probably not wanting to sit in USDC or Bitcoin, they need to off-ramp into fiat, right? They're running a trucking company. It costs $1,500 to fill up a truck with diesel. So in less than a minute of taking possession of TCS token, they can divest on an exchange. We're listing on the INX exchange this month. Very, very excited about that. And I think we'll be on some other great US-based exchanges later this year. But they can immediately sell TCS token on the exchange. At INX, they can go directly to fiat. Or if they want to, they can go to USDC. But, there's a lot of talk, too, in this industry about, unbanking industries and unbanking individuals. Really, that's kind of what we're doing here, right? Because we're moving the value of freight invoice settlement on chain entirely. Right. So now if you want to go straight to fiat, if you have a wallet or an account over at INX or a different centralized exchange, you can go straight to fiat and you can transfer fiat to your business checking account and run your business that way. But maybe you want to put a little money into Bitcoin, right? Maybe you want to do some things with USDC and dip your toes in a couple pools, right? Maybe some yield bearing opportunities. But really kind of what's happening behind the scenes is we're debanking the $2 trillion transportation industry, and we're moving the value of all this transactional volume on chain through TCS token.
Okay. So if I'm an investor or somebody and I wanted to, what would be the value proposition for like someone like me if I want to buy TCS token? Like why would I buy TCS token as an investor who's not involved with trucking?
Sure. And I get that question a lot.
I'm just curious.
Yeah. And my answer is, the person who would buy TCS token is the same person who would buy ETH or Solana or Bitcoin, right? And you have far more Bitcoin history locked away, I'm sure, than I do. But my recollection is, people didn't really care too much about Bitcoin until somebody bought a pizza with it. Right, until some transactional volume started moving through the token. And then all of a sudden it was like, wait a minute, this is a medium of exchange, right? This is digital money, right? And as more transactional volume moved through Bitcoin, the price went up, right? Now, tokenomics are important too, and I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit. Right?
That's what I'm trying to get to. What are the tokenomics here?
Yeah.
Obviously, this isn't something that's decentralized like Bitcoin or like an Ethereum.
It's not
somewhat decentralized.
Yeah.
Or like a Solana that's even less decentralized, but more than it's not centralized, but it's semis. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like there's different shades of decentralization. Is TCS a utility token? Is it a security token?
Yeah, we like to refer to it as a utility token because it is providing true utility to the transportation industry, right? Faster, cheaper settlement is a real thing. We have a capped supply. We'll never mint more. We never did an ICO or an airdrop or anything like that. TCS still owns 99.9% of the tokens, and
extremely centralized. You guys are going to be using this to
right. But you have a guaranteed buy side and sell side.
Can you explain how there's a guaranteed buy side?
Yeah, because transportation companies are accepting the token in exchange for their invoices, their commercial paper assets, their receivables. And when they sell tokens, when they divest tokens on an exchange, if the secondary market does not buy them, TCS has to. TCS is the contractually obligated buyer of last resort.
Okay.
We have to be because we have to guarantee that liquidity for our customers.
Yeah.
If our customers cannot get liquidity, then they're not going to sell us their invoices, right? So you have a very tight tokenomic model here where you have a guaranteed buy side and a guaranteed sell side. And at scale, you're going to have very significant amounts of transactional volume moving through the token, right? Again, this is transportation in the United States is a $2 trillion industry. Full truckload is almost $1 trillion unto itself, that sector. And about 70% of the entire industry is dealing with this factoring problem. Our largest incumbent competitor in the truckload industry has a $60 billion AUM. I'm a former customer of theirs. I can tell you their service sucks. It's expensive. It's slow. It's antiquated. But until TCS came along, there was simply no alternative. It's either, again, you wait 30 to 180 days or you sell your invoice to an intermediary.
This is obviously, seems like a huge opportunity, huge market. Now with the SEC, we finally have some common sense being restored there.
Yes.
So you can do more interesting, actually provide real utility, real value.
That's right.
With some on-chain ideas. So it's nice to see some of that coming back. Instead of just all this, gambling meme coins or whatever.
Yeah.
Which I have no problem with, but it's fucking gambling degeneracy. That's what it is.
Casino stuff.
Yeah. Let's just call it what it is and let's move on. The sad part is it sucks away utility and attention. I have no problem with people gambling, but it just sucks attention and utility away from real use cases that are interesting and intriguing.
Couldn't agree more.
Whether that be Bitcoin as a sound money, or whether that be these smart contract platforms like Ethereum, Solana, and then interesting projects like what you're working on. What is there if I'm trying to understand tokenomics? Like me as an investor, if I want to go just buy some on Uniswap or whatever, I want to know, is there a way for me to get a piece of that revenue that you guys are creating? Obviously, you're disrupting a huge multi-trillion-dollar industry. Obviously, there's huge profits there, which is why they do it, which is, like hard money loan.
Sure.
You guys are reducing that cost by 90%, and you can still make a reasonable profit doing that because it's a much more reasonable fee. Is there a way to take some of that and return that to people who actually want to hold the token? Is it can I capture some of that value somehow? How have you really thought through those tokenomics?
Yeah, we've thought them through pretty significantly. Again, I think the person who's interested in something like Ethereum or Solana or Bitcoin should also be interested in TCS token because when you push large amounts of transactional flows and volume through any digital asset, right, you get token velocity, right? Assuming that you have certain parameters met with respect to tokenomics, right? You have to have a cap supply, right? You can't have somebody behind the scenes that continues to mint tokens or mint fiat, right? We know how that ends up, right? But and typically what we've seen in any real crypto, and I'm kind of excluding the meme tokens here, but I guess it still applies to a lot of the meme tokens. It's like when there's volume in the token, that signals the secondary market. And the secondary market signals the secondary market, and these things kind of build upon themselves, right? So there are going to be some people, I think, that buy TCS token because they want to support faster and cheaper settlement for truckers. They want to mitigate financial waste in the supply chain. It's kind of like voting with your wallet, right? But I do think that there will be a lot of speculators that get involved as well because, again, if you look at the history of a lot of digital assets, when large transactional volume started moving through the token, the price tends to go up, right? And I would certainly never sit here and suggest that, the price is going to go to X or it's going to go to Y, right? But this is kind of fundamental economics at its core, right? When you have guaranteed buy side, guaranteed sell side, large amounts of volume moving through the token in a cap supply, you tend to be in a pretty good place.
I guess what I'm trying to understand is, as a TCS holder, is there a way for me to, like, you guys are, it's a business, right? So you guys are making money, even though it's 90% less than what traditionally is made by these predatory companies.
Right.
There's still a profit there.
Yes.
As a TCS token holder, do I get to share in that profit, or like, is there a way to do that? Have you guys thought about that?
Yeah.
Maybe
If
with burn mechanics or
Yeah.
some kind of, I don't know. I don't know what the solution might be.
Yeah, yeah. If the token goes up in value, you're certainly sharing in the value proposition, right? And I can tell you, it's always been on the roadmap to discuss some more innovative changes to let's just call them rewarding secondary market holders.
Yeah.
We were not able to talk about any of that during the previous administration.
Well, there's been a changing of the guard.
There
so it's time to start thinking.
Yeah, there really has. But I can tell you that there is a yield discussion happening behind the scenes, right? Because at scale, TCS becomes a very profitable company, right? And there's certainly a way to do that at scale.
Okay. I like the sound of that, and I think that you guys should definitely push the envelope on that, because, if you're this is what's missing right now, and this is actually what it's such a twisted and fucked up incentive because the SEC and the government has actually actively been preventing like real world use cases and incentivizing literal like meme coin degeneracy gambling. Like,
Right.
That's
And
what
then,
they've incentivized.
and then asking everybody,
Yeah.
where are the real world use cases?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
So
exactly.
allow the real world use
Right,
cases. Quit
right.
suing every fucking legitimate company that
Yes,
tries to actually
yes.
provide some real value to the world.
Yeah.
Stay the fuck out of the way.
Yeah.
Let shit actually get built.
Right.
And like, let's show some real world use cases like that where you can share with some of that revenue and reward for people that are supporting actual free market capitalist,
Sure.
value propositions
Sure.
that are making the world a better place, right?
Sure. And I will say this, I've been on the Hill a lot. I've talked to a lot of people. I do think that we're going to get a lot more regulatory clarity this year. And I think when we have that, you're going to see companies like TCS be able to be a lot more creative in terms of incentivizing all of the counterparties that are involved in any use case.
Yeah, that's how it needs to be.
Exactly.
And, it just shows, some real world use case and some real value and value sharing. Why would I want to hold this centralized token? Well, because I'm participating, I'm supporting this cheaper cost option for truckers where, hey, there's a mortal win there, but also there's a way for me to profit off of that, to share in that.
Yeah, hypothetically speaking, you'd probably be a lot more interested in holding TCS token if you were getting let's just say by way of example, a USDC yield paid out quarterly.
There you go.
That's a percentage of net revenue, right?
Yeah, or even if you guys take that and use it to buy tokens off the open market to support. There's all sorts of different ways that you could create it, or you could buy Bitcoin and give a Bitcoin yield, right? So truckers are holding it, they get it in their wallet. Which brings me to my next question. This shit is still complicated. Like, the average person cannot, like, I'm laughing when all these people are crying about losing money on these fucking meme coins. It's like, you realize like how complicated it is to, like, you got to set up a Solana wallet, you got to get on a DApp browser, or you have to get a DApp wallet on your thing. You have to know how to use, like swaps and shit. Like, this is like people who know what the fuck they're doing that are gambling, and then like, oh shit, I put all my money on the number 3 on a roulette wheel and I missed.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, they scammed me. Like, no, you knew what the fuck you were doing.
Yeah, you're
part of the 1% of the 1% that actually even knows how to do that, to like go buy meme coins.
Exactly.
Like, you know what you're doing. You live by the sword, you die by the sword. I don't feel bad for any of these people. It's all a bunch of nonsense bullshit. Oh, he dumped on me, he did this. Get the fuck out of here.
Yeah.
Get the fuck out of here.
Yeah.
You know what you were doing. You're gambling. Go gamble, go have fun, but don't cry to me if you lose. This whole, this guy or that guy did this. It's like, come on, be an adult. We're not children. It's ridiculous. And you know what? I'm not I feel like I'm the only person saying this. Everyone else is like, I read these long Twitter posts about how everybody gets dumped on and this, that, and it's like, dude, you guys are fucking know exactly what you're doing. You're all gambling. I talk to people, they text me all the time. They're like, which dog coin should I buy? Learn about Bitcoin is what I tell them.
Yeah.
And then 3 weeks later, I get the same exact message from the same people.
Yeah.
It's like, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink it. A
Yeah.
fool and their money are soon parted.
Yeah.
I have no problem with it. Like,
Yeah.
have fun.
Yeah.
But I don't want to hear any of these tears, any of this bullshit. Oh, melee this, that, or the other. I mean, come on.
Well,
This is
here,
insane.
and I think that's the perfect answer, right? Because you can, if you got $100, yes, it looks a lot better if you can get 1 million dog coins, right?
People want to get rich quick. and that's what it is.
Versus some de minimis sliver of Bitcoin, but you
Yeah.
can still 10x, 20x Bitcoin over the course of the next 3 to 5 years.
That's- that
with
would-
the same fiat.
That would
right?
require patience, though.
Yes.
That would require,
Yes. Right.
delay of gratification.
Right. Won't
That
happen
would
overnight.
require,
Yeah.
actually doing like an hour of research to understand why certain
Right.
things are important, right?
Right. Exactly.
But again, at the end of the day, people need to look in the mirror. You're responsible for your life, and that's what's missing from our society and our culture today, at writ large, right? So, but I'm much more interested in projects like this where I can, okay, I know what I'm buying. Like, I'm doing a little research. I can participate in this economic opportunity that helps people, also drives value opportunity. I can maybe share in some of that profit, and I'm supporting something that saves truckers 90% of their costs that they have to deal with. So that to me is fascinating. But going back to this idea of this is complicated. How are you going to get truckers to right now I'm thinking through my head, like, okay, I'm on an L2, I'm on Poly, I got this token on Polygon. Like, this is not an easy thing. Do you guys have an app that you're using? Walk me through this.
Yeah, this is my favorite question. So right now we have $150 million organic pipeline of transportation revenue ready to go. Right, we were not able to onboard it during the last administration. I won't go into detail on that.
I mean, you don't need to. It's obvious. I mean, we know what's going on.
But I think it probably would have been, and that was with no formal marketing or advertising of any kind by TCS. I think the number would probably be 10x if we were out there advertising that we could settle all the invoices that the industry wanted to throw at us.
I know a podcast that's looking for a sponsor.
Yeah. So one of the and all of that demand came to us organically through the website. One of the questions that we ask, like when a carrier wants to inquire about services, is we ask the question, do you have any familiarity with crypto? Right? Have you ever opened a wallet? You own any Bitcoin? You'd be shocked. Something like 50% of the inquiries that come through the website say yes.
Wow.
So these people have dipped their toes. To the point that you're making, though, the way that we have been settling OTC via Uniswap, there's a lot of friction. Right, you got to have a MetaMask wallet. You got to have some kind. This is not for most transportation companies. That's why this listing of TCS token on the INX exchange, which is fully regulated, fully certified, FINRA, is so great because literally a transportation company can go do KYC AML. They can set up an account at INX, and hopefully this will be true at Coinbase and some other larger exchanges in the future. I mean, we hope that we might see some real movement on that this year. But they can go set up an account in 1 or 2 days. They've completed KYC. They have an account. TCS can now directly deposit tokens into their wallet, and they're on chain. And when they get those tokens,
not really on chain. You're on a you're
they're
centralized custodial.
They're plugged into Web3. Right,
kind of
the value of their work, right? The value of those invoices.
I mean, they're using blockchain technology.
It's now moving right.
I mean, but now you've got this another point of attack, right? If you get 4 years from now, you got another. I mean, I'm being devil's advocate here.
Sure,
you get the other side come back to power. We don't get the legislation we need. That's a point of disruption.
Yeah, I'm not concerned.
You're not concerned about that.
I'm not concerned about that at all.
I mean, having a way to do it on Uniswap, an easy wallet, maybe you guys could build something out where you've got, a DApp wallet or something where people can just press a couple clicks and you walk them through it, teach it.
Right.
That could be.
And we may get
no
there.
KYC, no AML.
Sure.
No third party disrupting.
I mean,
closing people's accounts or dealing with bullshit.
We may be at a point in 5 or 10 years where there's no such thing as a centralized exchange anymore. Right. I don't know.
I think there'll always be that. I think people, certain people, there will be a higher level of service and certain things, the ones that get it right. I think there will still be centralized exchanges, but it's crucial to create systems and processes that disintermediate these third parties that can wreak havoc on people's lives. So, the idea to just be able to to have an app on your phone that just plugs into Web3, that plugs directly into like the Ethereum blockchain, the decentralized ecosystem,
Sure.
and be able to press a couple clicks and use something like Uniswap in a decentralized fashion to swap your tokens and then just have them, right?
Right. But you know, some we got to take disintermediation and disruption in steps, right? There's a massive value proposition for these companies now because they can get paid in 1 to 2 days, 90% cheaper. And over at INX, it's 2 clicks.
Yeah.
It's 2 clicks to go to fiat.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So if you're a business, you don't, and I always answer the question, like, how do you educate the transportation industry about crypto? How do you explain to them how it works? And my response always is, tell me how email works.
Yeah.
If I send you an email right now, tell me how that works.
Yeah,
and the answer is you don't care, right? You just know it works. And we're going to see that's really going to lower the adoption curve in the transportation industry. When you run into somebody at a truck stop, right, and they're getting paid in 1 to 2 days 90% cheaper, and they tell you it works, and you sign up and it works, you don't really need to understand, at a developer level, how all of this information.
Yeah, I mean,
I couldn't even explain most of
nobody
that
understands
to you.
how SMTP protocol works.
Right.
And your text messages.
Exactly.
Nobody understands anything.
Right.
If,
right. If it works,
yes, on you go to a website, nobody understands how hyperlink transfer protocol works. So I get that argument. It does make sense, but I guess what I'm saying is,
and I would argue too, there's less friction. Once you have an account at INX, or hopefully Coinbase in time, right? Once you have an account, you go on there. It's 2 clicks. If you want to go straight to fiat and transfer fiat to your business checking account, you can do that. There is infinitely less friction in that process than there is in the current process with factoring companies, where you're waiting for 10 days, right? If your remittances don't match, your factoring company just doesn't send the money at all.
Mm-hmm.
You have to chase it down. You have to find out when the ACH is actually going to show up. So, I mean, we're actually streamlining a lot of processes in addition to making it faster and cheaper.
Don't sleep on the Uniswap stuff there in the MetaMask and some of these dApp stuff, because I saw the other day they're right into your bank account now.
Yeah.
So you can actually, you don't even have to go to a central exchange to liquidate. So
we have that option. Yeah. We have that option right now for carriers. If they want to be in Uniswap, if they're degens, if they want to stay off the centralized exchanges, we can do that.
But just getting paid in TCS, pressing a couple clicks, swapping it into USDC or USD or whatever,
right,
and then just transferring it to your bank account right through that. I mean, that's
right.
Hopefully there's more and more providers. I don't know what the fees are and what they look like, but I saw Robinhood and MoonPay and a couple other options are there now to just boom right into your bank account.
Yeah, and the fiat, if you need it. Yeah, the fiat off ramps are getting better and better and better.
I'm hoping at some point we don't even need the fiat off ramps, right? Like you just keep it in USDC in your wallet if you want to lock it in, and you can pay your vendors in USDC.
That's right.
It just that seems like the future to me. Right?
Yeah, and I think that is the future too for companies that 3 to 5 truck operators. You may be able to pay your drivers in USDC. It's like, why wouldn't I take USDC?
Yeah,
right. If I understand it and I have a wallet.
Yeah, no doubt about it at all. Fascinating.
I think you probably saw the article just come out. The CEO of Bank of America kind of reluctantly said, "Yeah, we're probably going to have to create a stable coin." Right. And his rationale for that was a wallet and a stable coin basically is a checking account.
It really is. I mean,
right.
And it's a decentralized checking account.
It's the same thing for businesses, right? It's a business checking account.
You're exactly right. You hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
What other industries are affected by this problem? Because I know we're talking about trucking right now. I did my best to wear my trucker outfit today.
You look great.
What are you, because I know you mentioned this the other day when we were having a 3-way podcast, but what are the other what other industries could benefit from using this as well?
Yeah, pretty much all industries. Factoring is a problem in most industries. It's not unique to the full truckload sector and transportation. They have these issues in LTL and air and rail. It's a problem everywhere, but the economics do change depending on the industry, right? Like, for example, if a driver delivers a load of potatoes to Walmart, that's really good commercial paper. Like, that is a great real world asset, right? If it's payable in net 60 or net 90 or where it's corporate paper, right? Very highly rated, very liquid. That's not always the case. If, for example, somebody wanted to build a digital payments platform, digital payments company over in the medical device space, right? You're dealing with different debtors, right? You're dealing with different companies. So the dynamics change a little bit, but I do believe that the Satoshi thesis in digital payments is going to disintermediate and disrupt many, many industries, just because, like we discussed earlier, faster and cheaper wins. It's a better tech stack at the end of the day.
Yeah. Have you ever? I think you should rebrand this coin called just call it Factor. That's what you should call it, because that way it's like, instead of just truck, it's like, you can do it for all these different industries.
Well, you can always change the name of a company. Right?
That's true. You should just call it Factor.
I will say this though,
Change
again, full truckload alone in the United States is $1 trillion market. 70% of its factoring, that's $700 billion. If we got 10% of that market, like, we'd be very, very happy.
Yeah.
But to your point, we do, on the horizon, we see opportunities in other industries because it's the same problem and the same solution.
Yeah, you should try to. I think you should rebrand to capture all that. Because it's brilliant. I mean, I think this is a perfect example of a real world use case. Very interesting. What's going on with Node 40? You guys have a little collaboration with Node 40?
Yeah, Node 40. Yeah. Node 40 is a fantastic company. They specialize in reporting for digital asset transactions, helping individuals, institutions, businesses figure out capital gains, capital losses, flows, things of that nature. And we effectively have a shared user, right? Let's say you're a one truck operator and you typically do $250,000 a year in revenue. You're used to just selling, emailing your bill of lading, your proof of delivery to your factoring company, and having somebody ACH you fiat in 10 days. Well, now all of a sudden you've been working with TCS for a year. You've been moving all of your value through a digital asset. Your accountant may not know how to handle that. Right? When you print off a CSV at the end of the year saying all of my freight invoices have moved through an ERC20 Polygon token over an INX, your accountant might look at you sideways, right? So so Node 40 offers a lot of value there, and the CPA network that kind of orbits Node 40. We think that there's an opportunity to bring, and these are established American businesses, right? And they're not all one truck operators. They're not all 3 to 5 truck operators. We've been approached by freight brokerages that are doing $100 million a year in revenue, right? But they're going to need those types of services even more if they have large flows moving through digital assets. So Node 40 has really been a pioneer in that kind of niche. And I view us as having a shared user at scale.
Interesting.
Yeah.
You mentioned this opportunity, 700 billion opportunity and trillions of dollars and all this stuff. Is this just in the US that you're talking about?
I'm just talking about the US.
What about the rest of the world?
Yeah.
I assume this is a problem
in the entire world. I would say the total addressable market for TCS globally is probably over 10 trillion.
And do you think you can address that market? Have you thought about outreach outside of the U.S., or are you just launching here first?
Well, we're launching in the U.S. and Canada. I think Mexico would be the logical next progression, right? And we are kind of we're looking at the horizon, right? But at the same time, we want to solve this problem first. It's a very big addressable market. But as we discussed earlier, I think that there are going to be much larger opportunities that develop.
Fascinating. What's your rallying cry to truckers, Bitcoiners, freedom lovers to get them to jump on board?
It's interesting. You asked a question too about kind of explaining the concept to truckers, and we saw this with BJ Dichter. We saw this with Bitcoin Ben. I hear it from truckers all the time. Most truckers and folks in freight brokerage and third-party logistics stuff as well, there's a real libertarian streak that runs through the industry, right? It's very pro small business. It's a perfect application for this type of technology because these are freedom-loving people. Right. A lot of these people don't want W-2 positions, right? They want to go out and start their own business. Mm-hmm. They want to go from the holy grail for a lot of these companies is to go from one truck to 100, right? That's their dream. That's what they want to build their career on. So enabling faster and cheaper payments also means giving them a better opportunity to scale and survive boom and bust markets in transportation, right? It's very difficult to survive and scale and build businesses when you're paying 30, 40, 50% of your net revenue.
That's wild.
Just to get paid in 10 days, right? Like most business owners that I know, if I told them like, hey, I want to come in and I want to talk to you about, an essential service, it'll only cost you 30 to 50% of your net revenue. they would tell me like, don't come anywhere near my office,
Yeah.
right? I have zero interest.
They probably have no idea though. They're not doing the math. They don't understand this, and that's why they can be essentially preyed on here.
and that's actually, that hits the nail on the head. But that is the rallying cry. It's do the math, right?
Same thing with what's going on with our government, with inflation and money printing and all this stuff. People just don't get it. They don't understand it, and there's an incentive for them to make sure we don't understand it.
Right.
The majority of people have no idea.
And at 3% annualized inflation, most people aren't paying attention.
Yeah.
But in the last cycle that we just saw, where inflation ticked up to 12, 13, 14% annualized, all of a sudden people are like, wait a minute, what are we doing here?
So they claim. I mean, if you look at shadow stats and some of the way they just keep changing the way they financialize how they measure it. If a certain good or thing goes up into it inflates too much, they take it out of the metric to artificially they feed the population.
Well, the funny thing about this last cycle, we had Janet Yellen and all these brilliant people telling us that inflation was transitory.
Oh yeah, that was But
I mean, this hurts.
Anybody who studied Austrian economics just knew that they were totally full of shit. Like that. We printed $5 trillion. It's not going to. There's going to be no inflation.
Yeah.
Get the fuck out of here. I mean,
well, but the interesting thing is this hurts the poorest communities the worst.
No doubt.
This hits small businesses the worst, right? The people that are at a competitive disadvantage. If you're making $100,000 a year, you maybe don't care if eggs go from $2 to $4.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're on fixed income, or if you're making a lot less than that, it really matters.
Yeah.
You can't print your way out of a problem like that. So, I this stuff is very real, and I in a way, I'm very thankful that people have gotten this education over the last couple of years, right? Because the kind of the banking cartel and centralized finance, they can kind of get away with this thing at 2 to 3% annualized inflation. People really
that's the
can't
goal.
tell.
I mean, they try to
exactly. But it really blew up. All the modern monetary theorists were like, oh, if you have the world reserve currency here in America, you can print as much as you want. I mean, that was their thesis. That was their argument for decades, and then they tried it, and it didn't work.
Yeah.
So
I think you hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
2 to 3% a year is insidious, and it's a stealth tax, and most people have no idea, but you can kind of get away with that, right?
Yes.
I mean, it's that's kind of like, people are kind of willing to accept that tax, even if they don't fully understand it. But it sucks for people that try to save for the future, because 2% every year after 10 years, you've lost half your fucking money.
Exactly.
Your purchasing power has gone down. It's cut in half, right?
Exactly.
Which is that's the insidious part about it, is people who don't understand that that's happening, and there are a lot of those people,
and
poor people.
And in my mind, the freight invoice problem is the same type of issue, right? Yeah. It's like, well, 1%, 2%, 3% doesn't sound that bad, but when you really start doing the math, you realize how much damage that's actually doing to your business and your earning power.
I mean, all that extra money you could have kept to reinvest and to create more prosperity and done all that stuff has been financialized away, and
that's right,
taken from you from a big banker, right?
That's right.
And they do solve the problem. It does exist, right? Like there is a problem there, and it's obviously it's a free market, so the truckers are making the decision to accept it because it's better than the alternative of not getting paid for 180 days or 30 days, whatever it is. You know what I mean? So it is a value. That being said, it's a market ripe for disruption, and it seems like you're on top of that.
It absolutely is, for that reason, right? Because these companies need an alternative to the status quo.
The government has actively been preventing projects like this for the past 4 years, and even longer than that, right? Because of the lack of clarity. Instead of just saying, hey, and entrepreneurs, go build, and we'll figure it out after we know what the problems could be. Well, let's figure it out then. Let's not try to over-regulate and be overly burdensome, and regulation by enforcement and this kind of like third world cartel type shit that's going on here.
Yeah,
that's been happening, right?
Exactly.
With the entrepreneurs of this country. So
right.
Todd, I'm proud of you. Keep building. This is really cool. It's interesting, and I'm excited to keep following this. Do you have any last minute messages for our listeners? Anything else you want to share?
Yeah, I would like to share. You're welcome to visit us at tcsblockchain.com. And I think I teased it a little bit earlier, but our hard launch is at the Mid-America Truck Show at the end of this month. It's March 27th through 29th. This is the largest truck show in the world. They typically get 75 to 100,000 people. TCS token will be live on the INX exchange at some point this month.
Todd Ziegler, it's been a pleasure.
Likewise. Thank you.